Wizards is a 1977 American animated post-apocalyptic science fantasy film directed and written by Ralph Bakshi, starring Bob Holt, Jesse Wells, Richard Romness, David Proval, and a special appearance by Mark Hamill.
There will come a time on the planet Earth when science and technology will be long forgotten, when humanity will rise from the ashes of nuclear holocaust, when wizards will rule the world. 20th Century Fox presents Wizards, a futuristic fantasy epic born in the mind of Ralph Bakshi, the master of animated magic. And it is more fantastic, more enchanting, and more powerful than anything you've seen before. Wizards, the ultimate futuristic fantasy epic.
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm John, the host, and I'm joined by my other, slightly less animated co-host, Mr. Coleman Yeti, and Johnny Mulligans. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Are you?
It's an honor.
It's up in the air. We're talking about a very, you wouldn't think about it. Like, after watching Wizards, at least for me, like the first time, after watching it and someone told me that this was one of the most important cult films of all time, I'm like, really? But, I mean, it is an interesting film, and we're going to get to that. But let's start at the top. Coleman, what did you think about Wizards?
What the fuck? Yeah, I mean, I have been excited to talk about it because every piece of it, what the fuck? I'm sure there was some deep meaning behind all of it, but I couldn't quite decipher what it was, what they were trying to get at. It's a movie. It exists.
Kind of.
It happened. We're here.
Johnny, you actually watched this when you were a kid, right?
Yes, this is a movie that found its way into my parents' VHS collection. And it had... I didn't realize it was by the same director because there were pieces of it that seemed very similar to another movie that got way more fanfare. You may know it as Lord of the Rings. Lo and behold, there was a 1978 version that most of you may not have known about. And you'll find a lot of the same animation and creative stylings from that movie are kind of holdovers from this movie. Same director, 1 year prior. You're going to find the same tools used here. The artistic implementation as far as animation in the background, it's all there. It's a kind of a mixed bag of mediums. So technically, from a technical end, it's kind of this interesting use of the technology at the time to create a special effect. And then the storytelling is kind of this, I watched this when I was early teens, maybe. When I first saw this movie, I first found it and watched it. I wasn't in high school, maybe middle school, that kind of thing. And I've watched it a few times over the years. And as you watch it more and more, as you get older, the symbolism that's involved in this movie starts to pull together. It makes more sense. And just to kind of put the baseline down, it's a story about history repeating itself. And it's kind of, in 1977, they're talking about things much more pertinent to World War II. But if you fast forward to 2020, you're going to find there's some reflection there that applies to modern day. The whole history repeating itself gives this movie longevity. Even if the animation is cheesy, even if all the actors are dead, it all, it's an interesting piece. And it's definitely, if you're looking for post-apocalyptic, the world has died and come back to life after millions of years kind of movie, this is an interesting take.
I like that it's different as far as a post-apocalyptic film goes, that, like you said, this is after the great cleansing, so to speak, and now it like the world becomes so pure that the purest of life forms like fairies and dwarves and all this decide to come back to the earth, which is like all these magical beings are now in control of the world, because the humans, the ones that survive, have mutated into these kind of like Lord of the Rings-esque mutants and Uruk-hai and all these things. It is a super interesting premise, and this is from Ralph Bakshi, the Israeli-born animator who grew up in Brooklyn. He's very famous in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. He was the one that fronted Fritz the Cat, which was the very first X-rated cartoon. He also did, like Johnny said, Lord of the Rings. Right after Wizards, he did Coonskin, which is another one of those kind of earmarked as one of the most influential and important animated films of all time, but I just don't feel like putting myself on some kind of a watch list, so I'm not going to review it. And he also did, and his last film was Cool World, which that's kind of a cult thing all to itself. Like, people either, it's one of the most polarizing films, I think. It's like the Who Framed Roger Rabbit on too much Xanax. People either love or hate Cool World. And I don't even know how I feel about Cool World. I remember liking it when I was a kid. Watching it again recently, I didn't like it as much. So Bakshi's had this very polarizing career of making, he's a guy that wanted to make animated films geared towards younger boys, but with a message, like, because he is an extreme political leftist, and so he has this like commentary on all these in all these films, because usually they're all set in like some kind of an urban nightlife. This was his family film. He was trying to break out of that mold because he was getting pigeonholed with not only his like adult style cartoons, but also the message he was trying to get across as well. This is also about the fascism versus naturalism and all that. So even though he kind of changed the coating of paint, I still think that the message was similar to his other films. I know you think it's like a batshit crazy film, and I think we're all in agreement there, but do you think that it kind of landed in the attempts that it was going for?
That's hard for me to say, because again, I was trying, I guess Johnny shed some light on it, but I had a hard time deciphering what exactly it was going for. I can see that in history repeating itself. I thought it was really interesting that they used the dynamic of technology and magic, and those were like the two major powers that were fighting each other. But yeah, I couldn't even say if it landed. It didn't land with me. I know that.
Sure.
It seemed very slow. Cartoons from the era had far better animation than this movie put out by 20th Century Fox. It just wasn't, not necessarily my cup of tea, but interesting.
As far as the animation goes, because I want to touch on that too, it's total mixed bag, because I think Johnny said it. It's like a collage of different styles, where it has that traditional hand-drawn or crumb style of comic animation, where everything is just a little accentuated. The noses are a little bigger, the boobs and the nipples are a little bit more pronounced in this family film. This is for the
right.
Wizards is for the kids, according to Ralph Bakshi.
It did not land in that sense.
No.
This is not a family film.
With swastikas and just full on murdering of elves and like fairies as like hookers on the
Fairy
sides of the road.
hookers out in the street.
That was for his attempt as far as trying to make a more widely palatable film for a more general audience. And this was a PG film, but that's PG in 1977. I mean, Poltergeist was PG back then. So the rating system was just a lot different back then. But yeah, those type of deals didn't land. I think that this is one of the better films that I don't feel like I would ever want to watch again, because I appreciate the fact that it exists, but it's not, I can't say it's a super enjoyable watch from start to finish. The animation style is really cool. It even pioneers that rotoscope that Ralph Bakshi was kind of the forefront on, that you would see where it's just like the overlay of the cartoon images on real actors. And he basically, like, for a lot of the war scenes with like these riders and stuff, he would take stock footage of just like cavalry riding in, or like a storm in the background, and then overlay animation on top of that. So you get that like really like pseudo-realistic animation style, which he would use on like pretty much all of his films, that better filmmakers in the future, like Richard Linklater, would use in like A Scanner Darkly and A Waking Life and stuff like that. So he pioneered the style, but it doesn't look great all the time. No, the matte paintings, the backgrounds look good, but it does look weird, and it's very disjointed.
Yes, the animation and the artwork that's weaved into this is like bits and pieces work better than others. Like I see some of the background artwork in this is really interesting, kind of, you know, I think Ralph Steadman. Like I see some of this stuff and I was like, this is the accentuated, really bizarre and overly, how do you, like, just absurd caricatures of stuff, like either the buildings or the people or the characters, and it's all still frame. So it's like, okay, that's cool. And then you've got some classic animation, which is, you know, as Coleman said, there's better animation from that time. And then you've got that, you know, the director's style, like where he takes the real life animation or real life footage, overlays it with this animation. And you can tell that, you know, where they made the changes, they're putting devil horns on the Nazi troops, that you could tell it's German footage of German troops from the 1930s and 40s, and then they put the little evil eyes and everything. It's like, okay, we see what you're doing there. We get that. And it was just like it was a neat little experimentation. Like I think he took this movie, tried things out, and then took that to Lord of the Rings and tuned it in a little better. You know, like, and then the storyline was that was just like this, like you said, this got his foot in the door for a bigger cinematic like Lord of the Rings.
This came out essentially it came out the same year as Star Wars: A New Hope, so the very first Star Wars. So, and he and George Lucas were both kind of vying for budget from 20th Century Fox at the time, and Fox was shooting both of them down. Like both he and George Lucas were going into the office to request more money. I think actually wanted like an additional $500,000 for the film or something, because I think the film wound up getting like $3 million or something to make it, and they just wouldn't do it. So he had to basically front his own money to finish the film, because the studio just would not budge on $1 more to make this film. One of the funnier things about this film is how George Lucas went up to Ralph Bakshi and he's just like, hey, I got a movie coming out this year. It's called Star Wars, and the original title to Wizards was War Wizards. He's like, we can't both have war in the name because people will get confused. So he paid Ralph Bakshi an undisclosed amount of money and wound up dropping war from the name, where it just turned out to be Wizards. And then kind of another thing was he was looking for more cast to fill it out, and George Lucas is just like, hey, I have this guy Mark Hamill, he's a young kid, he seems pretty talented, and so he sent him over, and Mark Hamill got to be this sweet little fairy that gets brutally murdered after like 10 seconds of being on screen.
I didn't even realize that was Mark Hamill.
Whose decision was it to go to a porn set and find a band to score this movie?
I'm sure Ralph Bakshi was the manager of the said band. Like, let's just be real here.
Found talent.
Yeah. And it all revolves around these like two brothers. One of them's Avatar, who's the good fairy wizard, who's your like typical stoner hippie, you know, anti-establishment kind of, you know, naturalistic, hedonistic kind of person. You know, that was very popular, especially, you know, after Nam. And then you have Black Wolf as the like kind of deformed twin brother that has like no skin on his arms, which is really weird and creepy.
He is the reincarnation of Hitler, apparently. So that's what they were going for in this movie.
He looks like Rasputin, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Weird, no meat on the forearm bones, kind of bearded, crazy hermit, evil person.
Yeah, Bob
nailed
it. Bob Holt, like I said, plays Avatar. Do you guys know what? This is a little trivia time for you guys. You know what Bob Holt was famous for voicing? What character in the 80s?
No.
Gizmo from Gremlins.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was very
him.
It was very awkward watching the kind of the behind the scenes with Ralph Bakshi talk about. He's like, well, there's all these things, but it's really a love story. It's about this old guy that just wants to be in love with this young girl, and how he feels like really self-conscious about it. And
in the creepiest way.
And then they get together in the end, and it's beautiful. I'm like, oh God.
In the creepiest way.
Just.
And he's the laziest wizard on the face of the planet. Oh, I can't do that. I'm just so old. You guys go and do stuff.
And she had no idea how to dress for the quest across the hellscape.
That's right.
Clearly.
That's right. Because Black Wolf had he had to find all this old Nazi technology and weaponry. He had this like grand army. He had like the Blitzkrieg propaganda machine, all for like the lazy wizard to just finally stumble out of bed because of tits, to just like kind of like twinkle his little fingers, and then he kills the brother finally. All it took was just confronting him, to motivate this person to confront his brother.
And what does he do? He shoots him. Just like, it's not a wizard battle.
Right.
Not them waving the wands. Nope. Gun up the sleeve. Done. Like,
uses the technology. That's
Right.
what I was like. I'm sure there's supposed to be massive symbolism behind all of this stuff, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on what the symbolism was supposed to be.
Right.
Like,
it wasn't. You know what? You didn't miss anything. In the last 5 minutes of that movie, you know how you said it was slow to watch?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem was it was slow to watch, and then when they got to the end, they needed to wrap up the fact that Eleanor betrayed because she was brainwashed by Black Wolf, and then Weehawk has to explain it to him as they're running out of the castle as it's falling down. I'm like, well, that wraps up a lot of plot points pretty quick.
Yeah.
Sure, fine. It was like, yeah, I think they got to the end and realized, oh crap, we need to button this up.
The proposed sequel to this was a love triangle between Avatar, Weehawk, and Eleanor. That was going to be the sequel.
There was going to be a sequel?
There was going to be a sequel. It did not get made.
Thank God they did a different project like Lord of the Rings, which was actually a decent story.
Well, this movie was no Fritz the Cat, but
thank God.
Right. No coonskin, let me tell you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does this hold up? Did this film hold up?
No. Absolutely not.
No.
It was, you know what, boilerplate, yes, the whole history repeating itself thing, and is it like a significant piece for its time and where the director was in his creative process? Sure. Does it really measure up over like plot wise? Yeah, maybe, but it's just you can find that in other films. The whole it was more entertaining for me in my youth than it is now.
I feel like there's very few people that you could sit in front of this movie, children or adults alike, that aren't going to want to know what the hell is going on and probably turn it off.
Fair.
Yeah. I'm with Coleman on this one.
I'm glad.
The more we talk about this, the more I'm on down with him.
I'm glad it exists. It's an anomaly that it even exists. It's one of those, it's just like, people signed off on this. And underneath it all, there's a message there, and the same could be said for all of Ralph Bakshi's films, maybe except for Cool World or something, because that was just, I don't know, Cool World's just a mess. But this is definitely a mess. I would, if this had like, I don't know, 5 million more budget wise, maybe he could have gotten to make the movie he wanted to make, and maybe we have a different tune. You know, maybe they had better animators, or not even better animators, but just like, you know, more budget to do it correctly, maybe more time to do it correctly. I don't know. I feel like it's a half-done film because it's just so thrown together, and there's so much in there to like. Like, some of the artwork is gorgeous. Some of that monochrome painting, the backgrounds, like I said, the rotoscope is cool at times. All of that is great, but then he just had to like Ralph Bakshi it too much, and he with the whole Eleanor thing and just the really kind of unlikable protagonist, like main character. It just, yeah, it falls pretty flat to me, and I don't think it really holds up. The only reason I tell people to go watch it now is because it's free. A high def version of this movie is free on YouTube. So it's just like, you're going to be out zero except your time. And if you're into this weird shit, then maybe this is for you. So that's our half-ass recommendation. You guys have any closing thoughts on Wizards?
Yeah, if I saw a turd on the side of the road with a sign that said free, I wouldn't get it just because it was free.
Fair. So this is better than that, then. It's better than a turd on the side of the road.
Luckily, this is well camouflaged as a movie. just enough to get you in the door.
All right. Well,
and it tricks you, because then you find out it's a turd.
we will be uploading this on all your favorite podcast sites like iTunes and Spotify. Leave us ratings. Tell everyone that we are reviewing films, cult films, and all types of films. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you could do so at The Cult of Films. I'm at John the Host. Coleman Yeti, where can everyone find you?
Find me at Coleman Yeti on Instagram and Twitter, and on Two Bananas Adventures on YouTube, and right here on The Cult of Films.
Woo!
You'll have a new onesie next time.
That's right. Challenge accepted. Mr. Johnny Mulligans.
You can find me here hanging out at The Cult of Films. You can find me on Twitter at J_Mulligans. Then that's fine. That's just fine.
See you next time.
Well?
Well, what?
Well, what now?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, why don't you sit there for a couple hours while I figure it out?
Okay.